Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and today I'll be guiding our discussion. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. So, let's talk a little bit about what do we need to get into? What do we need to ask? What questions do we need to start asking ourselves to be able to get your organization to be able to gain a little liftoff, start ascending on its uh, journey, right? On its journey to transform and to obviously ever improve, right? Not only your organizational culture, but all of your objectives, right? To achieve your goals. That's essentially what everything's driving towards. Because when we do this, we're satisfying the customer, and in turn, it's reciprocal, right? It allows you to take care of your team. Team takes care of the organization while they're doing the work, right? It all becomes an intertwined loop as long as we're all stepping up and doing our part. So let's talk today a little bit about some things we can ask ourselves on your journey. Are you doing some of these things? First of all, let's start with your team, right? Some teams, some organizations, their teams, you suffer from a large number of, a large percentage turnover, right? Low retention rate. And that's a significant problem. And the reason why is because for every time you lose somebody and you have to bring somebody new in, and all the whole process is costing you probably 3 or 4 times what it would have cost for you to maintain that person anyway, right? So it's tripling and in some cases quadrupling your costs on that end. So there is a monetary result, right, that will show up as a result of some of the reasons why you're potentially not being able to hold on to folks, right? And so you have to peel the onion back and then ask yourself, you know, what do we need to do to retain folks? First of all, do we know why we're losing folks to begin with? Now, if you're using external hiring, I will say firms, but sometimes the firms will supply employees. There are firms hiring employee pool firms that do that. If you're doing that, you have to ask yourself, what are these new employees or these uh, third party employees that are now technically employees? What are they seeing your organization? What kind of assessment are they making? Because you're having to use outside firms. Are they seeing that there's a disconnect? Is this really just drawing and perpetuating a line of distance between your supervision, your leadership and management, the ownership, and the rest of the team? Is there a chasm? Are you creating a virtual chasm between the team because you are going through a firm? What are they imbibing from this experience, right? Have you ever asked them? Have you ever surveyed them? Not the firm, the individuals. What do you think about this? And they're probably going to tell you, well, if you're having to use firms, you're kind of acknowledging that you have a retention problem. And if you have a retention problem, you're kind of acknowledging that you're not really fixing your retention problem, because this becomes an ever fulfilling, uh, not like a prophecy, but ever fulfilling loop, right? If I'm using a hiring firm, what do you think that's doing to my supervision and my management team? They're pulling back. Do you think they're stepping up to do their best to lead and to supervise? No, they're essentially running your outfit, and this could be subtle, right? It may not be overt, but subtle. It's no better than the pharaohs of old, uh, whipping the slaves along. I mean, think about it. There's a chasm there. You're doing the work, you're treating them abruptly. They're not seeing themselves as individuals who are being invested in as people who are going to be long term employees, right? And perhaps because of this, your standards for hiring also have fallen as well, right? Well, we can't get enough folks in here, da 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 da. You're asking, or you're saying the wrong thing. You need to get the right folks in there, the right people in there. right? You need to get people who are going to be committed, the people who are going to do this. And this is also a difficult challenge, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but if folks are just coming in for just a paycheck, now don't get me wrong, people need the paycheck. Don't get me wrong. They need that. But you want folks who actually have their own vision of where they want to take their lives. Perhaps they have a young family or a family, et cetera, right? They have a purpose for being there beyond just the paycheck. Maybe it's the paycheck initially, but it's the long term. And what do you think they're doing? They're making an assessment of how your organization treats them in this entire process, so that even if you go into some layoff scenario, God forbid, you go into some layoff scenario in mass, do you think that there's going to be positive communication, positive marketing from these folks when they move on? Well, of course not. Absolutely not. It starts with the hiring firm scenario, right? And then this becomes self-fulfilling. Then you do the layoff thing, and then it just becomes you're reliving a nightmare over and over. Now, I guess it's job security for your recruiting team and your HR department, but I mean, come on, folks. I mean, we can work on getting better about what we're already doing. We don't need to turn this into added work, right? The work that you're doing to make a product or provide a service is the actual work. That is your value that you're producing. That is what you need to get done and what you need to get to your customer. What is not part of your value is playing these rope-a-dope games with employees and then creating this reverberating endless loop of silliness, right? So if you're using hiring firms, wean yourself off of that nonsense real fast, and get committed to people. But in the process of getting committed to them, raise your standards. You don't just bring anybody on your team, especially if you've got an A1 organization hopping along, right? You need to raise the bar and then find folks that meet that bar or get pretty doggone close to it, right? So there's that piece of the puzzle. Now, if you're not using hiring firms, just pull the hiring firm scenario out of it. And then again, are we caught in the loop now? And is our supervision and our management team and your other support staff, are they retracting themselves? Is there a chasm, an us and them culture, right, in your organization, which absolutely destroys organizational culture, right? So you gotta be careful. There isn't a chasm, and some of that chasm can come from lack of confidence that we've talked about in other videos, too linear of approach by leadership and management to motivate, inspire, and communicate and to work with and engage with their teams, right, and develop them. If you're not developing them, that's the next big piece of this puzzle. First started with the firms. If you're not doing a firm, if you don't fall into that sector, then move that off the board for now. And then look at, am I just creating a reinforceable, repeating loop? Then are we developing our team, right? Is there a structured development system within your organization that allows them to grow, allows your team, right, the broader employee pool team, to progress? Is there, and I don't mean, well, you've been here for 2 or 3 years and you get a certain pay bump, blah, blah, blah. Folks need more experience, more exposure, cross-training where you can do it. I'm going to tell you what, if you can work it in, cross-training is an amazing thing. Why is this? You probably don't need 15% of what you keep, regurgitating through because you have folks that can do multiple tasks, right? And now you find that your value stream can keep humming along because you have people that can do different things, right? So that if you have some stuff that kind of quiets down in certain areas, then you can shift some of the focus. So these are some of the things you can kind of look at. But you need to wean yourself off the hiring firms. You got to get committed to the people who are on your team. You have to develop your team. You have to make sure your leadership and management team also are getting some good training, that are getting some good 360-degree training about human beings, right? Not just about managing and about leading. Look, folks, you're going to get some canned stuff out of that, but you need to get them exposed to some team dynamics, group dynamics, right? And get them familiar with some human uh, aspects of behavior. Get them familiar with human behavior, because I'm going to tell you what, if they don't understand that, you've lost before you've begun. You're never going to be able to wean anybody off of the hiring firms and get out of that loop of losing, right? If you're got a bit of a turnover, 3 to 5 or 3 to 4% a year, that's negligible. People move out of town because they're going to move across the country because of family and all the reasons, personal reasons people have. That stuff can happen, right? But if you're in that 10, 15, 25, and if we're looking at the stats, folks, there are organizations out there that in the 40s in their turnover rate, which is horrid, right? So now, if you're using the hiring firms, you're essentially misreporting your turnover, probably. Why is that? Because they aren't technically your employees. The only employee there is the hiring firm. Okay, so yeah, while you might track it, are you reporting that part of your national stat? Probably not. So, so you're reporting or you're showing, oh well, we've got a 94% retention rate. In reality, you're probably shooting about a 78, right? So we got to get honest about these numbers too, folks. We can't just keep, this is difficulty too. If you're site leaders and team members and the whole swath, and then if you're a board member or if you're, an owner, and how much smoke do you believe is being blown up your tailpipe every month and every quarter because of all of this stuff, right? This is all waste, folks. None of this is going to do all the negative return from this has nothing to do with your productivity, your quality, and um, your customer service, right? It doesn't. It's so non-value add. It's not even funny. So that is a big one right there. Is turnover, right? Turnover. The other thing is look at your on-time delivery. What is your on-time delivery? I can tell a lot by looking at on-time delivery. To me, it is the prime metric that I use to get a quick snapshot of what I'm seeing in an organization. So if your on-time delivery is 88, 89, 91%, I'm going to probably knock about 5% off of that, and go, okay, that's probably closer to what you're traveling most of the year. And let's see where the struggles are there. What's the struggle in the value stream? And you're going to have to unravel your value stream to figure out why you're not in the 95 plus, right? Ideally, you probably want to be 97 plus, right? If you're shooting for best in class, and everyone should be shooting for best in class, I don't care who you are and what you make and what service you provide. If you're not shooting for best in class, then that's part of the problem. You're not aiming high enough to be able to hit your targets, right? So, shoot for that 97 plus. And if you're in that ballpark now, okay, now wean in, peel back the onion within that value stream and see if there's other things you can do to squeeze out a couple more percent, right? Because look, folks, every good survey and feedback that you can get from your customer on your customer scorecards and all of that is going to help your organization grow and thrive, right? Happy customers, right? Happy customers, happy life. So on-time delivery, peel into that to understand why are we late? Because oftentimes what you start to chop back into at some point, and you've probably heard this. Oh well, your logistics team essentially for your material pipeline, right? So ordering your materials and getting them in, they're either lagging too far behind, And then what you get into is a leap between lagging a little behind or ordering way too much, which means you're carrying way too much inventory, right? So you have to constantly work to zero in on your sweet spot so that you can, hit that and then make sure your suppliers are being diligent, which means we got to communicate. So some of these things, as you peel back into it, you start to find out that, oh, we're not following up. We may have ordered a thing, but did we follow up to validate, verify, and validate that it's going to be here on the date that it's supposed to be here, right? A lot of times it's fire and forget, and most people don't even follow up, right? There isn't a follow up. So, and if there is a follow up, is there too much of a gap? Is the gap too large such that by the time you actually figure out that it's going to be late, whatever material resource we're talking about, that there's nothing that can be done about it, right? It's not like you could order it from someone else. Better to put this on your suppliers. Look, if you at all fall behind, I don't care if it's by a day, right, or a day and a half ish, I want an email saying, hey, I'm slipping on this, we've slipped on that, whatever, because as early as possible in the process, because you can work on that. You can potentially make up some of that gap in-house potentially, but you can't make up a week. I mean, you just can't. And if you can make up a week, then something's off with your planning, or something's off with your quantities, or something's off with your timing in there somewhere, right? You're either carrying too heavy a load, or again, lagging behind. So, looking at on-time delivery, you can start to burrow into this stuff. The other thing too is how much time between the time that your product, in this case, we're using product, that your product's done, right? And we'll say your quality department and or quality function, because sometimes those are interlaced between, if you especially have duplicate roles and so forth, depending on how big you are. What's the lag time between the product has been produced, it's produced and it's ready to be, may not be packaged 100%, but it's produced and it needs quality to sign off on it, right? And is it sitting for a day, 2 or 3 days, or longer, waiting for quality to get to it, right? So these are opportunities, folks, to compress in, because everything you can get out, you need to get it out the door, right? Oftentimes, you're trying to hit certain targets too, not only just on-time delivery, but you're also got your shipping goals as well, right? And that's literal revenue generating shipping right there, right? So you don't want things just sitting around and accumulating, getting lost in the shuffle. So you might find pockets within there. And the difficulty is if things are laying around and there's this lag time, what happens is if somehow you get behind in another aspect of your value stream, what ends up happening is everything now starts to go behind and go late. And then that just becomes this chain reaction, this negative domino, what I call the red domino, where everything starts to compile, right? It starts to multiply on itself in the negative. And now you're so far behind, it's unbelievable, right? So, and now you've got folks that you're calling in on the weekends and you're doing all this kind of stuff. Why? Because we didn't do the proper prior planning up front, and we didn't do necessary follow-ups. We didn't communicate. We didn't engage. We just dropped the ball, right? And it ends up costing you somewhere else because of this oversight. We can say negligence, but this oversight, in some instances, these oversights add up to costs, negative costs further on down the line. So you have to be careful. So that's just a few things to burrow into a little bit. The other thing too is making sure you're following up with your customers on orders. If you're getting a report out once a month from your sales force, it shouldn't be the case. I mean, you should have some real-time numbers on that. And usually with all the dashboards and everything out there now, you should have a good beat on that. Make sure that you are not relying on your estimated orders, right? You want to exceed those goals, exceed them. Why? Because what if you lose some, right? What if somebody shifts gears or something happens? There's a natural disaster somewhere, and all of a sudden one outfit's operation comes to a screeching halt. Do you have? See where I'm going with this? You can't be shooting 99% when you got to be planning for you need to be 115%ing this and keep that pipeline full, right? You don't want a bunch of drop off in flow either. Because why? Because your production team, right now, there's good things you can do with a little bit of downtime. You can improve upon your operation. So if you have upcoming downtimes, like say around the holidays, or where things might slow down for a few days or a week or more, etc. This is typically when people might bring in people like myself, other consultants, and so forth, to come in and to tune up your operation, right? Get your team constraints that you haven't maybe taken the time to address. So there are some things you can do with the downtime. Don't get me wrong. There's some very constructive things you can do with it, and you should. But you don't want that downtime to be thrust upon you. You want that to be something you've planned, not something that you're just always in reactionary mode to. So proper prior planning, folks. Don't avoid reactionary, jumping through hoops. Your team can sense this when there's always a helmet fire, right? When things are always we're always scurrying and scampering. Any operation is scurrying and scampering all the time. They aren't doing the proper prior planning up front. They're just not doing it. If they're doing the proper prior planning up front, then you have a nice even flow to your operation. When you don't, people are chasing their tail and they're struggling. And it probably means your organization is, leaking out, I would say dollars and cents. It might be thousands, it could be millions. And if you start adding it up and you do some of the some of the research that I've dug up, you're probably losing about $1 million a year in inefficiencies, right? So at least, and for the bigger outfits, the bigger sites, you're probably in the 5 million a year. All right, folks, I think we'll wrap that up for today. But these are just a few little insights to be able to worm into to get your organization, your operation to where it can take flight, right? Because you want to be able to provide and produce for your customers. All right, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to hit the good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage folks. When you're doing that, not only helping to transform culture, but you're transforming yourself. You can't transform anything if we don't transform our insides. We can't transform the outside, right? All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like and share and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.